Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Daniel Shaw-Dennis, and I am really excited to be presenting this session for you today, talking about the 5 essential steps to modernize your analytics application. Now, there are more than 5 steps if you're going to go down this path and modernize your application, but really what I wanted to talk about today is that you are looking to go down that path. You might have a legacy or a homegrown system, and you see the advantage of having something that would provide more value, provide more insight to your customers, and therefore more value to your core product. What are the kind of high-level things that you really need to think about if you really wanted to modernize your application with analytics? Now, I have a little bit of experience in this world. I've been part of, scarily, as I put this together, the analytics world for over 25 years. And do a lot of work with our kind of community in terms of advisory on analytics and go-to-market. And as part of Yellowfin for a while, we've worked with hundreds of partners, helping them modernize and take their embedded analytics applications to market. So I've got a bit of experience here, and really for the kind of, the next short while, I'm going to be leaning on that experience and talking about, what are those 5 essential steps and the things you really need to consider and think about if you're looking to modernize that stack. Now, if you're only here for a short while, there are 2 things I want you to think about if you are going to have to toddle off it after 10 minutes or so, is that if you're looking at this, I guess a couple of things to really think about is, well, first and foremost is, how is your customer's life going to be better now? If you are going to modernize, if you're going to include a modern analytics application as part of your core product, it shouldn't be just data for data's sake. And I'll talk a little bit about this as part of today's session. But really thinking about how is this going to change the way your customers get more value from your product? And ultimately, how you can potentially look at this as a kind of metric is that, okay, if you're presenting insight, if you're presenting, I guess, your data as part of a modern analytics stack through an embedded analytics tool, what are the actions, or what's going to happen once your customers consume that insight? So are they going to be alerted to something and be able to take action? Are they going to have a better understanding of what's going on and therefore make a better decision? So if you are driving an action, if you are making a change with your customer's behavior, that's when you know you have something valuable. And that's when you want to present it in a way that's going to really entice those behaviors and ultimately become a more valuable part of your core application. So that's probably 2 things you really want to think about, because that's really going to flavor a lot of what I'm going to be talking about as part of those essential steps for today. But really, I guess if you're still thinking about making the case for analytics, and once again, you might have a legacy system that you've always had there that has your tables and charts, which is done fine for existing legacy customers. What you find, particularly with the modern analytics stack, is that it can be an additional revenue stream. So not just adding value to your application itself, but as an additional revenue stream itself. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this today. As well as having, really clear competitive differentiation. Now, a lot of your competitors out there might be having some form of analytics and tables and charts, which, these days are table stakes. But really going to talk about, with modern applications where you can really provide some real differentiation with your product to really stand out, provide more value, which often leads, obviously, to more value for customers means more loyalty. And often having analytics, you're taking the load off your team. Often we get a lot of partners come to us saying, look, they're getting a lot of requests, to help customers manage their data. They want more insight, etc. And it's, taking away from their core application. Part of the reasons why looking at something like Yellowfin is to enable their customers for their own insight as well. There's a lot of advantages to looking at this as part of your application. And if I think about that analytics curve, and those who have attended a few of our webinars in the past will be familiar with this, is really kind of think about, firstly where you are on with your analytics journey. And you might be having some basic reports, maybe some visualizations as part of your applications today, but really thinking about modernizing. You want to provide as much value as we can. And we refer to it as, contextual analytics, which includes things like AI. So be able to actually really embed something that makes sense to your customer, that they can understand it, they have a clear picture of how they need to use that information, and it really helps them as part of their workflow as well. And it's an easy part of their workflow. You're not adding more to them. And I'm going to talk about some examples here today in relation to that, and really kind of building up that analytics curve and providing more value for your customers. But those 5 steps, and as I said, I'm going to keep it short and sharp. I don't like to linger on with these webinars. I want to really be kind of precise and talk about the key concepts. And really those 5 areas I'm going to touch into is firstly, building the right team. What are some of the things you really kind of need to think about from a resource perspective, and the skills that you need to get the most value out of modernizing with an analytics stack? The second is, data strategy. Once again, not going into the weeds here, but once again, what are the things you need to think about, that your customers need in formulating the data strategies to support this? The third is design. Once again, thinking about your audience, thinking about designing and building for that audience to get the most value. And I'm going to show you some examples of just what I'm talking about. Fourth part is the commercial approach. How are you going to sell this? How's this going to make sense as part of your stack? And I'm going to show you some examples of different commercial models that our partners have used in the past. And then lastly, and this is something that is often overlooked, is what is the value proposition for analytics within your application? And this is a really, really important one about how do you position this in the right way so you're using the analytical capability in relation to your own product and your own value proposition. And I'll talk a bit about this, and I'll show you some examples. I'm big on examples as part of our webinars here today. But really, as I said, this is going to be 30 minutes, and there is a question panel in the GoToMeeting box. So if you did have any questions as we're going along, please pop them in, and I am happy to answer that at the end of the session. So let us get into step 1, building the right team. So you can imagine, if you've got your own data applications, you've got your development team, you've got your technical team, maybe you've got your core product, and you've got your kind of sales team, your product team, all of those components that are doing well with the products that you have out there at the moment. But analytics is a different beast, and that's the one thing you've got to really think about. It's not simply as adding a feature onto a product, and you really got to think about it as part of your application, and managing that as part of your application as well. So if I think about some of my experience with successful teams as part of this, and once again, depending on your size, this might be someone with multiple roles, but you really got to think about a few things across here. So firstly, you're going to have your project sponsors, you're going to have your people managing that project, which is clear. And you're going to have the people that are impacted by that. So you're going to have, I guess, the key thing here is those analytics developers, the people who are going to not just integrate and embed that as part of the application, but develop the content that's going to make a real difference, to your product. So this is not your existing product team, but thinking about how to visualize data in a certain way, how to ensure you're not just, putting kind of data for data's sake. There's so many times I've seen people just flooding screens with tables and charts because they can, and often their customers are getting lost with this kind of big visual kind of dump of data. But really thinking about, well, how is your customer going to use that information, and how can you present that in a way that they're going to get the most value in the quickest time and provide a real differentiator for your product as well. And then feeding that into your sales and marketing so they really understand the value proposition, which I'll talk to in a little bit later on. But that's the biggest gap that I see, is that those specific BI and analytics skills that are often missing. Now, and this is where I said, Yellowfin, this is more about the session about thought leadership. So we're not a consulting arm. So really want you to think about, if you're looking at this, is what are the skills that you need from a purely analytical point of view, a BI point of view, so you can present analytics in the best possible way. And ultimately means it'll be adopted by your customers. If I look at this example here, this is one of our partners who are building applications for kind of sporting teams and looking at the way to present player data. And as you can see here, you've got a visualization on the map of the human body. I can visually see who that is. I can easily see that there's probably Nolan's shoulder is probably where he's got the biggest challenge, without having to read through spreadsheets, without having to even read through line charts and things like that. So the way that you present that data can make a massive difference to the way that it is adopted by your audience, but obviously how you can then push this out as an awareness and a marketing tool to provide more value to your product as well. But how do you then plug this gap? Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Of course, you can contract some specialists in. So even getting some advisory and some just to help to understand, look, this is the data that I have. How best can we present this? Within Yellowfin, we have a number of different dashboard galleries as well. So we have a lot of assets that will show different ways to present some of this data, because we've been doing it for 20+ years. You can hire the specialists, of course, and often you can also train your team. So once again, if this is a real strategy as part of what you wanted to do, it might also make sense to train that team up so they know that, or bring in maybe 1 or 2 people in the team that have those skills that can work with the team to really develop that, so you can showcase the best of your product. And as I said, look, as a vendor here, we have a big, extensive partner network. So if you're looking to embed it through a vendor, then leaning on their partner network to get those initial skills and get your team up and running is a great way forward in market as well. Number 2, data strategy. So look, this could be a very large one, and I'm not going to get technical here. I'm going to talk about it from a high-level perspective, is what you really want to start to think about from your data strategy, because what enables your application from a data perspective might be different to the way you want to present that for your audience from an analytics perspective. And that starts with kind of knowing your audience, right? Are you creating analytics from an operational perspective to give someone a day-to-day view of the data and make decisions around that? Are you looking at something maybe at the C-level? It means an aggregated, easier to consume view. Being really clear about what are you trying to do here, trying to provide them insight or reducing time to make a decision as part of that. And the third thing is to also think about, and this is, I've got my sales hat on, is, if you're going to sell your products and applications, is that value proposition through data clear to your buyers? Can they really see by the data, wow, this could be something really valuable to make conversations with your customer CFO a whole lot easier. So with that data focus, really thinking about a few key things, right? So what is that scope of data that I need to do? So how do I need to massage this? What state do I need to get this into so it's ready for the kind of reporting and modern analytics stack that I want to create for my customers? So firstly, look at history. How far back do I need to go? So how much data do I need to bring in here? How detailed do I need to get? So if I have that operational view, it might be very detailed down to my individual transaction records. If it's for a C level, it could be something really aggregated at a month-by-month level. Do I need it in real time? Once again, if I need something that helps someone on a manufacturing floor, it needs to be pretty close to real time. If it's going to a C level every quarter, not so much. And then thinking about the security, how do I need to structure my data so that it is only visible to the people that they need to see at the right times as well? So all those kind of high level things you need to think about to understand what you might need to bring in from those source systems to get it ready for reporting. But as a kind of rule of thumb, kind of depending on the type of analytics you want to provide, if it's an operational, typically that might be a 3-month history. So, people want to look at that, make a short-term decision, get on with their jobs. We don't need to have years and years of historical data necessarily for an operational use case. If your use case in that role is a more analytical piece, so maybe they're comparing last month to this month, doing some slicing and dicing, it potentially is kind of 12 to 24 months that you're aggregating at a kind of, at a level that'll allow them to do the type of analysis that they need to. If it's at exec level, it might be a 3-year horizon. That is, once again, heavily aggregated up for that particular target audience and the way that they want to consume that information and data. But obviously, all of this might obviously depend on your audience and then the effort that you need to kind of wrangle that data together so you can provide the best outcomes for your customers. Number 3, so designing for your audience. And this is thinking about how to present that information, how to actually physically design the analytics so that it is engaging, it is adopted, and it fits the audience that you're trying to provide value to as well. And this goes back a little bit to, once again, who's your audience? What's your vision? Going back to those roles, who are you trying to create for? The operational use case might be more technical, so you can provide more technical take. Whereas the C-level might be pretty straightforward, very, very clear, few KPIs and very concise. So the key thing is to know your audience, ensuring that you don't overwhelm them. There's no use spewing lots of data and visualizations just for the sake of it. There's ways to present that in the right way. Also understand their technical limitations. Like you might have customers that have 1 or 2 power users who really know their stuff, but ultimately you want to go to the other 1,000 people who might not have the same technical capability as those couple of power users. And be clear, you can always roll in features over time. It's always thinking about what do they need today and how can you add that and augment that and get feedback as part of that. But really, thinking about design, and this is one thing that probably, with the emergence of Apple, etc., you're seeing a lot more care, a lot more consideration on design. And that is the same for analytics. You should really be thinking about the design that is clear, that is concise, and ultimately going to enable your audience and the value that you're trying to create for them. So really thinking about a few things. So firstly and foremost, it's got to be relevant, not just data for the sake of data. And it goes without saying, it has to be accurate. If you're going to release something with a little bit of doubt, you're going to lose trust straight away. So think about it from a usability perspective. It's got to be intuitive to all levels of your target audience. And ultimately, it's got to be beautiful. We're all creating applications here, and you want to be able to provide that application so something that differentiates and ultimately is engaging and is adopted by your users. Thinking about the value to that user's role and being able to really show clear value in this kind of data-driven world. So I'll show you one example because I said I like my examples, and I think that's the best way to kind of showcase what we're talking about. So I'm going to flip. Hopefully, you'll see my yellowfin screen pop up there. So I'm just going to show you a dashboard example. I'm going to show you the kind of before and the after, and you can hopefully see the impact of really strong design. Now, this is a liquor sales data set. So this is about 7 years of our liquor sales that shows sales amounts, volumes, etc. Now, this is a standard way you can show this data. You've got my sales over time. I've got my volumes. I can look at my account segments, and I can see my information. It's all presented very cleanly, very nicely. I can see my KPIs, drill down on my whiskey categories, etc. I can do all those things here, right? And I can present information, all the data's there. And that's fine, but it just does what it does, and I have to really start to analyze and look and etc. If I think about this from a design point of view, how can you present this so it makes so much more sense for my sales team, for my category team, so I can really manage our liquor sales in a more effective way. So here's an example of a real kind of design-led dashboard where you have not just a case of having visuals, but you can clearly see the data. Have the context around it. So once again, we talked about contextual analytics, so helping people understand what's there, giving them the context around the numbers, and presenting in a way that makes sense to the way that they want to manage this. So I'm managing these categories. I can see my product ranges. These are my key categories. I'm not clicking on a menu button on my BI tool. I'm clicking on my whiskey category, and I'm going straight to my whiskey category. I can see the products. I can look at things, and I can engage it in the right way. So you can imagine presenting something like this to your customers versus the kind of standard bar charts and line charts, and it'll just make a real difference. Not only it looks so much better, but it's thinking about the way that they want to engage with the data and making sense around that audience and providing value for them beyond just spewing data out as well. All right, let's get to number 4, which is the commercial approach. And now this is an interesting one. And often, talking to partners who are modernizing for the first time and looking at, bringing in something that is beyond, just the standard kind of sheets of data that they used to provide their customers. This is a tricky one because there are different ways to approach this. the first thing I'd say around this is really think about what is the value that the analytics is going to provide your customers. It could be something simple to provide them better visibility as part of understanding what's going on in your core application. It might be actually early alerting to risk or challenges that could save them, multi-million dollars in fines or issues, et cetera, et cetera. So, really thinking about, well, what are those actions, as I was talking at the start of the webinar? How is that customer's life different by having this insight? And then thinking about, well, what's the value of that? And that can then flavor how you might look to put a commercial model together around analytics. And I'm going to share you a few examples from our, different models that we've worked with in the past and just talk through them. I guess the key thing as I'm talking through all of these is you want to make it easy, and you want to, as I said, talk about the value. And I think ultimately, providing something that makes sense for the way that your customers purchase and the customers buy and the customers are thinking about value as well. So firstly, you can have, a modular pricing. So, your core application costs this and analytics costs X. And you might have a set price for that. One of the more interesting ways you can do that is potentially have that as a percentage uplift. So, between your large customers and your small customers, that analytics pricing is all relevant and relative. You could just bundle it into your product and increase the base price. So understanding it's going to provide more value, but you want to do it as a whole package, and this is going to be kind of the base price now because it includes all this more value that you didn't have previously. You might just include it as part of your application, and this is probably a path that when you're starting out for the first time, you're not sure about this, is to really maybe kind of look at this as a starting point to understand kind of what you have. We see, where I've probably seen a good example of this is including kind of standard out of the box content for the core application, just to get a feel and a flavor for using analytics and using dashboards and using this content for the first time, and preventing more higher value analytics as an additional kind of price point as well. So once again, you can look at variations of these, but ultimately understanding what's going to work the best for your customers. Now that might be, as I said, a functional split. So you might have, all right, everyone gets all these dashboards, but if you want to do any slicing and dicing or creating of your own reports yourself, then that's going to be a little bit more. It might be a data split. So you might have certain data parts of your component you want to include as standard, but maybe some high value stuff that pertains to different parts of your application. It's going to be at a different cost. And that also might be a content split, as I talked about before. You might have a set of core dashboards that come with everything, but other high value ones that you want to provide separately. Again, so there are different ways you can do it, different ways you can think about it, but really, as I said, you want to make that as easy as possible. And if you're doing this for the first time, maybe using some of those, friendly customers that you know really well, trying a few things out, giving a couple of sweetheart deals, just to get a feel for the perceived value and what's going to make sense in your market as well. But I think really, test it out. I think it's also about monitoring usage with, applications like Yellowfin. You can understand, who's using what functionality, what content's being used straight away. So you can understand if you're going for a set of dashboards you want to provide more value for, or a set of functionality, you can kind of get an understanding if it's being used across the application, or conversely, you can get access to everything and then understand where the value is coming from and then create your value proposition and the commercial model based on that. But it's always getting that customer feedback, but also, combining that with competitive analysis. What are your competitors doing and how do you want to position yourself with that as well? All right, so we're on to number 5 and heading into the last 5 minutes of the webinar. So far, so good on the time. But I've left this one from last because often it's the last thing kind of people think about, because there's a lot of work that goes into integrating, getting it right, getting the technical components right, releasing it out to market. But often you get to the end and it's how do you add this as a value proposition is often overlooked. And I've seen it so many times, and we work with partners here, is that partners often just leverage our value prop. Let's say, okay, great, we can do drilling, we have visualizations, you can do this automated insight, you can use this AI capability, but it's not about that. It's not about the features of an embedded analytics solution like a Yellowfin. It's about, well, how does those features impact your core product and how does that create value for customers? If I can automatically deliver insight, what does that delivery mean in a better, faster way for your customers? How can they make a better decision? How can they be alerted to something quicker? And how is their life better? That's a really one thing I want to think about if you want to go down this path. I think you might be starting down this path. You know, if you're thinking about the go-to-market around this, and this is thinking about the marketing side of it, you're not selling a BI analytics tool. You know, it's not about copying and pasting kind of vendor collateral. It's about looking at the features and functions and all this kind of modern stack that you now have as part of your core application, and how does that impact the way that you can provide value to your audience? So integrating the two together to be more specific around your core product, your core application and value proposition. That's where I think I've certainly seen it, done well. And from a sales perspective, as I said, the other thing to think about once thinking about the value proposition is that analytics is often very different to the core application that you have for your product. So don't really assume that your sales team is just going to get it like an extra feature that they have, because analytics can be quite a powerful tool in your arsenal. So you want to be able to arm your own sales team to really understand the value that they have, the same way that you train up your sales team in your core application. Once again, you're going to invest the time and effort to do this. You want to make sure that teams that are out there are armed and dangerous and ready and understand what they have, so you can provide the best value for your customers, but also provide kind of the best value of your investment in an analytics tool. Now, I said I like examples, so I'm going to show you an example from the value proposition point of view that I think is kind of done really, really well. So let me flick back to the website here. And this is an example for one of our partners, Toustone, who created a product you see called Retain Talent around leveraging insights for staff retention. So straight away, what they're talking about here is, well, the problem with large organizations is staff turnover costs a lot of money. Very, very simply, very clear on what the challenge is. And how can you predict that and mitigate the risk? That is the value proposition, and talking about some examples of the analytics that actually supports that. It's not talking about drilling and visualizations and feature and function. It's talking about the problem. It's using examples of the analytics to showcase how you can predict and mitigate that risk, and then talking about how it works and then what's the value of that as well. So, a really, really good example of, thinking about, well, how am I going to use the analytics capability that I now have to provide that value in relation to my core product, and talking about the value proposition of that in relation to this case. How do I mitigate that risk in staff retention and use this to help predict that and get in front of that for my organization? All right, so just nearly bang on 30 minutes. Excellent. So really kind of that concludes what I wanted to talk about in relation to those 5 steps. As I said, I wanted to talk about it at a high level. If you're going down this path of modernization, to really start to think about those things, so you're making, getting the most value and giving your investment in analytics the best chance of success. And really, from a Yellowfin perspective, so this is really, it's not a product sell session. This is about kind of talking about some of those things. But from our perspective, we've done this for 20 years, which is why I could talk about these things, kind of hopefully with some authority given the experience, because, we've been doing this for a long time. And we've got a product that is built for this. Both, if you're a product manager and owner of a product, to think about your customers, and if you're developing it, having something that you're able to integrate and develop and get going, so you can provide that value as a modern analytics stack as part of your applications. But if you'd like to jump on the website, have a look. We've got a bit there. We've got a lot of examples of great analytics for design, if you want to have a look at that. There's a lot of other webinar content, but if you wanted to have a look yourself and go through some of the capability and how you get that as part of your your stack, please just jump on the forum website, and one of our team will be in touch. Well, thank you for that. And I will now go to bang on 30 minutes. I'm pretty happy with that timing. If you had any additional questions, please pop them in the box below. But what I will do now, I will go have a look and answer. Okay, here's one here. Dan, thanks for that. Out of all those items, what's the biggest challenge that you see in relation to building analytics? Interesting question. So I think, look, in terms of the building side of things, as I kind of touched on earlier, I think those BI skills, that's probably the biggest challenge I see. There's often a case of, all right, we want to create certain charts and reports, and that's great. We're going to use the team that we have there. I think, there's a lot of capability, as you'd seen with tools like Yellowfin, to create really beautiful, engaging analytics that provides value. So I often see that, getting some designer help, we do that a bit. So getting someone who actually knows how to do design and combining that with someone who understands the data is the best combination to then present that in the right way. And that's probably the biggest one to making a real big impact with analytics as well. Do you have any suggestions on transitioning existing customers if I'm going to provide them with a new kind of BI analytics package? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Often we get, organizations that come to us that have an existing set of customers, are moving to something like a Yellowfin, but how do you, I guess, bring your existing customers along in the journey as well? Look, with something like Yellowfin, often you're providing more capability. So part of, I guess it might be automation, it might be a way to visualize data, it might be alerts that they're now getting versus static kind of tabular-based reports. So part of it is, if you understand the value there, to your existing customer base, being really, really clear about, all right, we're building this, I guess, for you guys, and this is all new capabilities. So you're able to really easily justify the change, but also thinking about those existing customers and bringing them along the journey. So often we see those existing customers are great for getting that initial feedback, feeding that into it, and helping you kind of ramp into that kind of modern stack, and hopefully within a period of time, getting all of your customers on your, I guess, modern analytics application. All right, so that's all the kind of questions we had there. If there's any more questions, please pop them in the question box. But if not, thank you for attending today. Appreciate your time. As I said, if you want to have a look at more of Yellowfin, please jump on their website. But so wherever you are, have a good rest of your day, morning, or evening. See you later.